This podcast is for adults only, should not be used as a meal replacement, and may contain nuts.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Noobie and The Doobie. My name is Timmy. I am the Noobie.
Mary Jane, I am the Doobie.
We are happy to be with us on the spot, Marge Madden of football fame and of the Bite Me podcast. Marge, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a real pleasure to be here now that my football career is kind of waning. I've decided I need to do something different. So I appreciate you helping me out.
So was it like an ACL? You just get bored of the sport? How does that transition happen?
Pretty much I got bored of the sport. I felt like I took it as far as I could go and just reached the maximum of my potential and decided podcasting was probably more my thing now.
Nice.
Awesome. So it's kind of a Bite Me podcast. Is there like a sound that goes along with that?
No,
like
there should be. There
right?
Should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start recording bite sounds.
I'm your girl. I'm your girl.
Oh, really?
They literally would call that a sound bite.
Right.
Oh,
right?
Good one.
I like what
I'm a professional, Marge. Despite hitting the peak of everything that I can accomplish, both in comedy and podcasting, I just continue to go forward.
Yeah,
I love it. I like it.
So, Marge, we had a chance to meet you at Lyft in Toronto.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You were nice enough to come by the booth and hang out with us. I don't know. Did you come by when we were in Care Bear outfits or in 80s outfits?
I know the answer to this.
Yes.
You tell it.
You were still in your 80s outfits from the performance that you had given, which I had the opportunity to watch too. So, yes.
Really?
Awesome.
So you actually saw the performance and still went, maybe I should go talk to them.
Yeah, I was like, I think these people are my kind of vibe. So I came over and I thought I should say hello.
Yeah, that was very apparent really quickly too when we started talking with Marge. We're like, yes, this is our kind of people.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, and I have a podcast. I was like, you definitely are kind of people.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's called the Bite Me podcast. I was like, Baker, hello.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And if my hair wasn't so short, I've wanted curls so badly for so long. So
really?
Marge, just so much of this is just perfect right now.
I think so. And maybe if you grow your hair out, something might happen. I mean, I didn't get curls until I was about, I think when I hit puberty. I wasn't born like this. This is not what I was born with, surprisingly. So maybe you'll hit your stride if you grow your hair out.
But you cultivated it.
I manifested.
Now, is it true though that because people with straight hair want curls, and then curled people sometimes are going, you have no idea how much work this takes?
Yeah, probably, because there was a period in my life where I spent a lot of time straightening it all the time, like every day for a while, and that was a lot of work. Now I just kind of wash and go. It's actually not that bad, but you have to deal with things like frizz and not being able to brush your hair. So those are two things you have to think about. Because if you brush it, it just goes.
Yeah, I had a friend with beautiful, same like tight curls, and she told me I have to comb my hair in the shower.
Yep.
So that way when I get out, I just leave it and let it dry, and that's the best thing. And if, like you're saying, humidity, oh my God, then you deal with the frizz and
and you can't brush it in between those washes because
you end up with you look like a paintbrush, a big poof ball.
Yeah.
That's why I keep my hair. I have one haircut. The guy who does my hair knows exactly what it is. I have black t-shirts in my drawer, a pair of jeans, and the same wool socks. I get up in the morning.
Well, no, you have multiple pairs of the same style of wool socks.
Right.
Yes, I don't just have one.
I just want to clarify that.
Pairs of the same wool sock.
Yes.
You're Steve Jobbing it, basically.
Exactly.
That's what he did. He wore the same thing all the time so that he didn't have to think about what he was going to wear in the morning.
Right.
I think it's really smart.
Yeah.
I know. I don't have to worry about a hat head. I don't have to worry about, like we were in a pool yesterday. I got out. I didn't have to worry about, I got to get my hair done.
I spent how much time stressing over what I was even going to wear to go in the pool. I was like, do I wear this bathing suit, this bathing suit, this bathing suit? Timmy's like, I'm going in like this.
It took me 2 minutes to get ready for this podcast, Marge. And MJ's been working at it since late last night. So a lot of people, when they tune into our podcast for the first little while are going, like, do they even talk about cannabis?
Right.
And we do eventually like to get to that point, but
there's more about cannabis and the people that we talk to than just cannabis, because
of course,
like, and this was the thing that it took me a really long time. I was like, yes, I'm a cannabis advocate, I'm a cannabis model, I'm all this cannabis, but I'm also a mom, a teacher, like I'm all these other things, but I consume cannabis.
Right.
So that's why we want to know who you are and why you use cannabis and where you are in this journey and how did it help you get here?
The thing, just to say just to feed off what you just said there, what I think, and I think we might have even talked about this. We were, depending on how this all airs out here, we were at some point on your podcast, depending on whose gets released first.
Well, it was recorded first. This is second.
So. The breaking down of the stigma, which is very important. I mean, I think it's important on both sides of the thing. For someone like myself, that's important because I need people to see what I'm beginning to see. But I'm sure those in the industry need that stigma to be broke down too, because they want people to see what's actually happening as well. And I think one of the things that is going to be the most important, and it's not education is probably up there, but I think it's the fact that it's real people just telling their real stories. And if I was somebody coming in brand new and you get a chance to just see 3 normal people chatting about frizzy hair problems, it's kind of like, these people are not, they're not, well, maybe they would say we're odd. I don't know. But it I think creates a sense of like, look, the people who smoke cannabis or eat cannabis or rub it on their skin, whatever they want to do, they literally is the person sitting on the bus across from you that you would have no idea. They just get up.
It could be the bus driver.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
He could have just put a topical on his ankle so that way he could push that pedal all day.
They get up and put their pants on 2 legs at a time like everybody else.
You do 2 legs at a
time? Nice and quick. So you come across, although you are our vibe, and some people would say we have a weird vibe, you're just a regular person going about their day that day that happens to consume cannabis.
Well, I feel like our vibe is fun. That's what I feel like we were trying to emulate that day. And that's what we got back from you. And I was like, okay, so we need to have you on the podcast immediately. I was like, we just need to, because I love promoting, especially fellow podcasters. And I'm like, and it's about edibles. And I'm like, okay.
So
I'm like, I don't want to get in too far to the podcast yet though, because I want to hear your first.
We want to hear your story.
So I always ask, I'm interested in the first time you consumed cannabis. Now this may not also be the first time you got high.
Right.
So I want you to walk me through that experience, if it was good, if it was bad, how you consumed. You don't have to tell me anything about your age, if that's going to get you in trouble, like, or even get your parents in trouble. I don't know, but you're free to tell your story. I'm just so excited. Okay.
Well, first of all, my parents won't be listening to this. I was lucky to I had wonderful parents. My mom passed away a bunch of years ago now, but they were older when they had kids. So my dad is now in his 90s, and he has asked a couple times about how to tune into my podcast, but trying to explain the technology is not something I'm prepared to do at this point.
Yeah.
But I did also grow up in a pretty religious household. So when I was a teenager, like a lot of kids do, you're looking to sort of find ways to rebel against everything that you feel is weighing you down. And my best friend and I at the time decided we were going to try smoking pot because that's what kids at the time did. I don't remember a lot of the details because obviously it was a few years ago, but we did manage to find some weed. I couldn't tell you if it was weed or oregano. It might have been a bit of both. It's hard to say. She came over to my house. We had a sleepover and we snuck out of the house and went to the neighboring school. And we had rolled up some joints, probably very poorly. And we smoked them. And I recall she got high. And I didn't. I was just like, this is kind of a letdown. I was super excited about it. And which makes me wonder sometimes, what were we really smoking? Because I don't know if she was high from some placebo effect or whatever, but it just didn't really, it didn't do anything. So I think after that, it wasn't long after that I tried hash for the first time, because when I was in high school, hash was like huge. It was everywhere. That's all you could really get. So maybe that was oregano, actually, now that I think about it. But
wait, can I step in here, because I keep sometimes I get my brain gets confused sometimes still as the newbie.
Right.
People then throw in, and then I had hash, and I'm like, well, okay, is hash cannabis or is not cannabis?
That was one of the words of the week.
No, that was
a concentrate.
It was a while ago. I would like to hear Marge kind of explain how she knew that it was hash. I mean, you're just beginning this journey, aren't you?
Right.
So what's the difference?
I mean, it was a concentrate, definitely concentrated cannabis. You needed a lot less. And I guess I had friends that were like, maybe it wasn't as soon after. Again, this was a very long time ago, but it was sort of what was going around in the schools at the time. So again, oregano, weed, not really sure. It was probably swag, whatever it was. But the hash seemed to do the trick, because that first experience was pretty psychedelic, and it was a lot of fun. And that was really eye-opening, like, as to the possibilities as to what this could be, because I don't think I smoked very much. I probably didn't need to, but
so that didn't freak you out though, as an early, like going into that kind of really clear psychedelic kind of trip, that because some people I would think would probably go, hold on here, that's a little bit too freaky. I'm not sure, but you were okay with it.
I think because I was with friends. It was, that set and setting thing they talk a lot about with psychedelics. I think that applies a lot to cannabis as well. And it was just the right setting and the right feeling. So it felt really nice. And I mean, it was psychedelic in the sense that I got really high, like that first time you get high from smoking something. Not psychedelic in the sense that I was like, seeing kaleidoscopes in the sky or anything like that. So just to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so did that become your regular form of consumption at that point?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
It was pretty quickly after that I was drawn to consuming hash. Again, that was really what was available at the time throughout my entire high school career, pretty much. And all the trappings that went with it. Like I did, I smoked cigarettes too. And so I was doing bottle tokes and hot knives and all those fun things that people remember. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, I guess. And it was also a way to rebel against my parents too. So
yeah, it's interesting that hash actually was a huge thing at one point, because if we think about how it's processed, we know that it requires a large amount of cannabis to create hash. And the fact that we as teenagers in high school were able to just buy this concentrated form of cannabis at, I don't even want to say the deals we used to get it at, because it was good deals.
Yeah, it really was. But I think there's also like that small period of history where it was just so readily available. It was being imported into like Montreal and shipped across Canada, and Peterborough was a stop. And, I just happened to be in the crosshairs of that really lovely time in history when hash was plentiful, because I talk to people now who are like, they can't find it. I mean, I guess you can find it in dispensaries and stuff like that, but for a while it wasn't very easy to find. So.
So what was your religious background? So I grew up in an evangelical Baptist church, and if anything, cannabis was just simply not talked about. It's not like people were like walking around spreading the wrong information. Just it never came up.
Right.
And then as I grew up and I started to hear more about it in general, I actually began to preach against it. Like it wasn't a passive thing. I wasn't not standing on a street corner.
Well, you grew up during the Reagan years, like during that, like.
Well, I grew up during the don't do drugs. Yeah, the Nancy Reagan don't do drugs.
Yeah, like that big campaign that they were doing.
Right.
So, in your religious background, though, was it a thing of where the leadership of that you experienced were like sitting there saying, "Hey, like we're gonna talk about this because we don't want our kids being involved," or was it a non-issue?
Oh, it was an issue. Yeah.
Okay,
it was definitely an issue. Like, and I don't remember it being talked a lot about in the being talked a lot about that topic in the church specifically, but it was just one of those, like, doing drugs is a sin, getting drunk is a sin, all that kind of stuff. My parents were definitely not happy about it. And yeah, but I did grow up in an evangelical kind of church as well. And they took the Bible pretty literally. And most of the stuff that I did as a teenager, even though I, like, looking back, I wasn't particular, like, I was rebellious, yes, because I was like, my parents didn't like me listening to certain types of music and, that kind of thing. And so it was pretty easy to quote unquote rebel because, you'd fart the wrong way and I'm going to hell now. So
yeah.
So smoking weed definitely was a part of that. And they sort of didn't understand it either. So they equated with, like a lot of people did at the time, weed with being a gateway drug. Because I remember the assemblies and going to, like, having programs in school and all this stuff. And that was the big message of the day, was that cannabis was a gateway drug to shooting up in the streets. And that if you started that, then you're going to be on a lifelong path to death and destruction, which was not my case. Yeah.
So you literally just caused a flashback from my childhood. And I remember the board. I like remember the board that they put in front of you. And it was, this is what you're talking about, the gateway. Cannabis was at the bottom, and it was kind of like a friggin' like follow the trail. And when you get up at the top, it was like in like the skull with the bones. It was like, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
It was like you go through all the drugs and now you're dead.
Yeah, if you start smoking weed, next thing you know, you're going to be doing all the really bad stuff and the heroin and all. And those are the messages I was getting. And then, of course, my parents were like, it's a sin. It's bad. So
couldn't you also just create boards that, here's a bowl of Fruit Loops and then here's cake and then,
they should have put sugar.
You're going to die. Like,
they should have put
it's
a
the same
bag of
pattern.
Sugar up there.
Right.
It's the same pattern. Where, you know what? I would think that at the top of any board like that, you know what the final one is? It's a skull. You're going to die. That's the
no matter what. Exactly.
Right?
At the end of the day.
Well, I thought it was really strange. Now that I'm like thinking back to it, as a kid, I remember wondering, how was it even possible that, okay, I understand that's a police officer that's showing the drugs, but that board had actual drugs on it.
Right.
Like there was actual pills. And I was like, wait a minute, is that a real bag of cocaine?
Right. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe.
It sounds like you didn't hide it from your parents. You made a comment there if they weren't happy with it. Like, did you go through a period where you tried to kind of hide it, or you just were pretty open from the beginning?
Well, yeah, I went through periods where I tried to hide it, but there was also, I got caught sometimes. And I remember my mom at one point joined a support group for parents of kids who were doing drugs. And I don't know what kind of parents were involved. I think it was a church-related group, but I don't know if this was just parents of kids who were smoking weed or if it was like parents of kids who were doing all kinds of drugs. Because I would come home sometimes, and to this day, my favorite snack is still peanut butter and honey sandwiches. And I don't eat them very much because they're pretty calorically dense, but I would come home and have some of those like after school or something like that, or when I was out with friends. And if my mom saw me eating one of these, she would automatically assume I was high. And she was right about 50% of the time, but so sometimes you couldn't really hide it, but she just always made the assumption that I was stoned anyway. So yeah, that's at a certain point, you have to just run with it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of too stinky to hide too. Like, I mean, you can spray yourself, you can rush home, shower, and your parents still see the red eyes. And they're like,
it's the red eyes, although I always had Visine with me. And also when you're smoking hash, it doesn't smell as much, right? Because you're doing bottle smoke. So I probably smelled like cigarettes because I smoked at the time too.
Right.
But I didn't really come in smelling like a joint because I wasn't smoking joints. So maybe sometimes I could hide it a little bit, but it didn't really matter. She assumed I was high anyway.
Well, yeah, if she was part of that group, they were probably feeding her all sorts of information on signs to look for in your child. Like if they isolate themselves, they're probably on drugs, or you know, if they're never home, they're probably on drugs.
Right. And the one thing too, I think, was that they told people that if you get high, you get the munchies. So she would see me having a snack, even though I'm a teenager and probably eating a lot. And she would just make these assumptions based on the stuff that they were informing her about, which who knows what kind of bullshit they were feeding her, really.
Yeah.
Did they ever kind of accept it or make a reach out to try to understand?
As a teenager, not my mom really. We really butted heads during that period of my life. My dad was far more likely to listen to my diatribes about how weed isn't the evils that society is making it out to be. And he, to this day, is an incredibly patient man. So I always have appreciated that about him, that he would listen to me, even if deep down he was just like, I think what you're saying is total crap. He would never actually say that out loud to me. He did catch me at one point with a quarter of hash. And I don't know how that happened or whatever, but my mom and I got in a big fight. And then my dad calmed us down and my mom left the room, and he talked to me about it very calmly. And he asked me questions about it, like, how do you smoke it? What do you do with it? And he had it in his hand and he's like rolling it around and looking at it. And then he actually gave it back to me. And he said, well, I hope you flush this. And I did not. I definitely did not.
Sorry, Dad.
I probably told him I did at the time, which I maybe feel a little guilty about. But there's a quarter of hash when you're, back in the, when was that?
I feel like now, if your dad heard this story, he'd be like, well, it would have, if you flushed it, that meant you would have had to go out and buy more, which would have cost you more money. So you did the smart thing, really.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He would probably agree.
Yeah.
When was the transition then from hash being your primary source to now, having a podcast called the Bite Me Podcast and talking edibles? When did that transition happen?
A lot later. I had never actually done edibles until probably like my mid to late 30s kind of thing.
Okay.
And I've sort of used cannabis throughout my entire adult life, off and on. Like there's been periods where I haven't been consuming, when I've been pregnant or when kids were really young, or just depending on whatever phase of my life I've been in. But then later on, like in my 30s, I think I was away from it for a little bit, and then I was trying it again and experimenting, and I found that it could make me really paranoid, which I'm sure everybody's heard that story. Like they smoke it, which is probably because you're smoking too much. If you're not accustomed to smoking it all the time, it's really easy to smoke too much, especially with joints. And I would find I would get like uncomfortable and paranoid and not social, which sort of defeats the purpose of using it in a social setting.
Right.
And I decided to try making some butter. Admittedly, we were growing some weed at the time and we had all this extra stuff, and I had heard about edibles somewhere along the line and decided to try it. How I didn't overdose myself with those first edibles, I have no idea, but I guess I wouldn't be here if that was the case. So I tried, my partner and I, we made butter on the stove. It was a long, laborious process and not a method I would recommend anymore. But we made, I'm trying to remember, probably cookies or something like that from it afterwards. And I really liked the edibles high. And I found that was sort of my sweet spot, if you will. I could still like carry on a conversation. I felt warm and fuzzy and happy. And, it helped with some of the aches and pains. And I also really liked the slow onset of an edibles high, sort of that, you start out normal and then it just creeps in. So for all those reasons, that's kind of when I made the switch in a way. Like I do smoke still, but edibles is my preferred way to consume.
That's funny. As I was listening to Marge talk about all the positives and why she likes edibles, I'm like, that's why they scare me. I'm like the slow onset and all of a sudden it's like, oh.
I know you're painting a pretty creepy picture there, because edibles is something it was kind of on the list of how do I consume cannabis going forward, and if I do, how? And then you're like sort of going,
well, it has to be done right.
Slowly creep up on you.
No, it has to be done right. Like I want to applaud you just for saying the first time you made edibles, or you like, I'm going to make edibles, you decided to make butter. You know how many people I know that literally like, I made wheat cake, and they drop me a piece off and it's literally, you take a bite. And this is going back, like this is before, but I'm like, why are there like, it's just like ground up weed in cake batter. And I'm like,
it's gross. Yeah, I know. I know,
but it's true. It's true that cannabis edibles hit you completely differently than, smoking, because I can't handle the edibles, and I think it's all dosage for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I I really don't actually like smoking joints anymore. Maybe because I find my biology has changed. I find them pretty strong. But also as an ex-smoker, I just really don't enjoy the combustion aspect of it. So if I'm consuming that way, I use like a dry herb vaporizer, which I really love because it's so much easier on the lungs. I'm asthmatic too, lucky me. So I just find it's easier on the lungs, and I really love the flavor from that. So that's sort of the other way I go as well.
So, I know I just got myself a Da Vinci vape, and it is amazing for, like you're saying, the flavor, which you don't really get the flavor of the cannabis. I mean, you get a little bit, but like that's why I use flavored papers, because I want some flavor, but I like smoking the joints. What is your preferred, like what vape do you have? Do you have a portable?
Oh yeah, I have a PAX 3, and I have one called the Dynavap. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's more of a analog version. You have to use like a torch lighter to light it. They're pretty cool, actually. Great if you're out in the wilderness and you don't have to worry about charging anything. There's no pieces like that have to get charged. So I used both of those.
Nice.
Yeah. And the first time I used one, because I didn't use one again until, after I started experimenting with edibles, I was blown away because everyone was always talking about terpenes and like, oh, this tastes like, cake or like all this stuff. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. And then I tried a dry herb vape. It's like, oh, that's what they're talking about. It all makes sense.
So the one weird thing that I found with my vape is that I really, really like cheese strains, and I call them cheese strains. I don't know if they're like, if the name is something cheese, but when I smell it, to me, it smells so potent, cheesy that I call it cheese.
Yeah.
But to smoke in a joint, I love cheese. As soon as you put that in the vape, it is the nastiest because you get all the terps and all the from the stink. And I'm like, no. So I'm still struggling to find which strains I really want in the vape for the terpene profile.
Yeah, because some of those cheese strains can be pretty potent. Some people love that stuff. The ones that smell like piss or like garbage.
Oh, I don't like those.
Cheese, I don't mind the cheese, but yeah.
I don't know what terpene it is. I'm still looking for, but it's I call it kick me in my face weed. It's the kind that when you go to stick your face to the jar and you smell it, you literally have to like pull your head back because it like whacks you. And it literally like kicks you in the face.
Yeah.
I need to know what that terpene is for me, because I know that is the one that I need.
Right. Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love doing the podcast in regards to having two sides is, as you're talking, there's things that I think you said that if we were all just consumers, I don't know if I would pick up on it, because there's every once in a while, there's things that are said that I would just, what I'm about to say here, most consumers would probably go, yeah. And I think there's a lot that's attached to the stigma that's caused the break between the cannabis community and those that don't know the cannabis community or aren't in it, that the assumptions are just, yeah. And those assumptions can't be made. And the one that I kind of noticed throughout this thing is, number one, it's kind of blended between your adapting process over the years and the concept that MJ was kind of bringing in there about when you guys were talking about, oh, like this one, I don't love this one, or I don't know why people smoke this, and the personalizing of it. And I think on the outside, the perception is it goes back to my weed equals weed thing. It's just like they just sit there and they smoke, and it's like you're saying, well, there's times I'm a cannabis consumer and a cannabis advocate, but there's periods of time where I haven't, and yet the outside would kind of go, I assume, you start smoking and that's it. You're smoking 24/7 for the rest of your life. There's lots of people out there, I think, that have thought that MJ has converted me, and they just
and vice versa,
and they just assume They just assume that I'm smoking weed in the basement all the time now.
Well, you get secondhand, but that's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating to me because, like I said, I think a lot of the cannabis consumers that will be listening and watching this podcast would go, yeah, of course we adapt. We don't just smoke the same strain for the rest of our life. But I bet you there are people out there that do. They smoke it in the same way, the
Mhm.
same dosage amount, the same strain, because they found out in 13 that was their favorite strain, and they haven't adapted.
Well,
and they're just like, well, this is what I've been smoking for 20 years, and this is how I do it. So why would? And that's
I
just the
love
reality of human
I love
beings.
how newbie she is. I'm like, I have to stop you, babe. So, in order to consume the same strain for an extended period of time, you have to get it from the same plant if you want the exact same type of profile. So you have to have a mother plant, and you have to take cuttings off that mother plant. So if you
I
were
got all that.
if you were an amazing grower and you were able to keep that mother plant alive for 25 years, and you were able to make propagation and make babies and grow enough cannabis for yourself, I feel like one of two things would happen. You're going to get sick of the same strain because it is literally doing the same thing. And I know you're like, consistency is good sometimes, but what happens is your tolerance level, and maybe Marge, if I see you nodding over there, right? The tolerance level, you need more and more and more. And next thing you know, you're into like concentrates. And
I think too, it's like the concept of always smoking the same thing. It's like going to the beer store and always buying Coors Light. When you have like a wall of craft beer now and like international beers.
But there are people out there that do that, right? There are people who just drink, Coors Light.
Coors Light, yeah, but they still buy Molson sometimes. I think,
or they'll buy a bottle of Jack.
Right.
For the weekend.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm not saying that they smoke the same thing every time. Everybody has little things, but like when you say, I love how newbie is, the reality is there is a large segment of the population, like you sit there and say, well, this seems obvious to me.
Yeah.
Timmy, like clearly this is what would happen.
I thought like you're so cute.
But
also
that is not what a lot of people might think.
Right. Yeah. Also, a lot of people probably do consume it in the same way over time because people do also create rituals around their cannabis use a lot of the time. So like the act of rolling a joint, I don't have that ritual because I don't smoke joints, but a lot of people like Mary Jane probably has a ritual around rolling up the joints and smoking them. And a lot of people really enjoyed that part of it. So they are going to continue engaging in that ritual because it's such an enjoyable part of the consumption. Like never mind even the actual smoking, just that time to yourself to sit down and take a breather and just roll a joint or pack a bowl or slowly eat a cookie. I don't know, So some people, from that perspective, some people may just continue doing that forever because they just will probably switch up the strains every so often. They'll have their favorites, but there's always something.
Yeah, and you can create your habits. MJ has the one more thing, and sometimes I'm like,
just one more.
I don't even think she needs one more, but it's a running joke now.
So you want to do something? It's time for bed. Okay, but just one more.
It's like, well, you're just doing that because the clock says it was time for bed, and so now that's what you do. You do one more.
It's funny because Timmy also pointed out to me that I have transition moments. So in between going from one thing to another is a transition. And during that transition, I need a break.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm just going to go roll a joint. And
when there's a long list of things to do, taking an hour and a half transition break every 2 hours.
Yeah, we have to like lump multiple activities together so they get done.
Yeah.
It was like, so you were awake for 16 hours and you were smoking, taking a break for 8 of those hours.
Right.
It's a very weird.
It's all part of the self-care routine.
Yeah, well, that and I think the self-care thing is important too, because in my role of advocacy, I don't even know if that's a thing, but one thing that I keep wanting people to answer the question is the why. Why do you smoke? Why do you smoke this? Why do you smoke, or why do you consume it in this way?
He's on me all the time, and I am the guiltiest one. And I'm like, look, I just want to smoke a joint because I like smoking weed. Like, I just want to have a smoke right now.
But that's a why.
Yeah.
Oh, a genuine why is because I just like smoking weed.
I just want a minute to rest.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But now that comment just... Wait, what did you say that made me want to say that? Well, self-care. Self-care.
Yeah.
Do you use it? What's your why? Do you use it for self-care?
I guess you could say that, yeah, because I do use it a lot. I probably consume primarily in the evenings myself. I'm not really a daytime smoker because I find that it distracts me, and edibles are probably a bit too much for my daytime. If I have a long list of things to do and I consume some cannabis, I'm like staring at the ceiling and then gonna go have a nap. I'm not gonna get anything done. But it's part of my relaxation routine. I don't really drink anymore. Like I do drink, but I used to drink a glass of wine in the evenings kind of thing to sort of unwind and stuff. And now it's I almost never buy wine for my house. I might have a drink out with a friend or something, but at home, part of the whole relaxation process is using cannabis. And I think it's partly because it makes me feel really happy. I could be in a pretty shit mood and then, I'm laughing again about whatever. And I really appreciate that about it because it can, just living life can be sometimes really daunting and filled with there's always problems. There's always problems. No matter what you're doing, there's problems that you run into, and that's just life. And so I find it's just a way to sort of shed all the bullshit of the day and just relax. So it's definitely part of my self-care routine.
Nice.
I hope that answered your question. But
yeah, no, it does. And I think what I like about your answer is there's an answer. I used to say when I was in the church, I'd much rather hang out with a non-believer who could tell me, even if I didn't agree, but could tell me a thought out reason of why they were a non-believer, than to hang out with a Christian who couldn't answer why they were a Christian. Well, I was just raised in the church.
Yeah.
And for me, and I think this is, three things that we try to focus on our show and our brand, and what we're trying to do here is to break the stigma, raise the bar, and have the conversation. And in a world today that's having a hard time having the conversation about anything, let alone topics like cannabis, because the whole point of having that conversation, you've got to come to a foundation of going, look, even if I don't agree with you, I'm willing to sit down and hear your side of the story, and then walk away not believing that we're enemies just because we have a different opinion on that. Right. And so the fact that whether or not I even agreed with that your answer was good or worthy, I think people need to just take a step back and go, like, if someone can verbalize and have thought through anything, let's give them a chance to verbalize that and realize that, too many people don't think through anything at all, so I just think that's part of having the conversation. And it's another reason why I enjoy doing this.
Well, we've talked and touched upon intention a lot. I think in first season, especially because you should be using, I think, anything in life with intention. I mean, you pick up that weight set, you're intending to get stronger. So why are you picking up that cannabis? And as I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my God, I have said for like years, I don't believe there's recreational cannabis use. I believe there's only medical use. Whether or not you think you're using it for recreational, you're still using it for medical. You're using it to relax. Is that not medical? And I'm like, shit, I use it recreationally and medicinally. Because like there is a time I just want to smoke it. That's the recreational part. So I'm like, I'm learning as we're sitting here. I'm like, okay.
And I think it's super interesting to hear people's stories as to why they're using it, because there's such a broad range of purposes and intentions. And so for people who are new to it as well, it's always interesting for, someone to hear, well, this is how I use it. I'd like to use it in the evenings to relax and unwind from a day and shed the bullshit and just feel good. And for other people, they're using it throughout the day because it helps them with their anxiety or depression or whatever else, aches and pains. And there's everything in between. And then there's people who don't feel comfortable using it at all. And all of that's okay. And that's the one thing that I love about cannabis is that there are so many different ways that it can be used and appreciated, or not used and appreciated as well.
Well, I think what you just said there with, and it's okay to consume or not consume is interesting, because that in itself is a not universally accepted
it's a discussion
statement
for sure.
Because we know people who are adamant to the point of they will die on the sword that everybody not only should, but needs cannabis.
Right.
And it's like, hey, I haven't gone far enough down the science, rabbit hole to find out whether or not that is fact. I've come to a place to realize that more people need cannabis than I thought needed cannabis. But these black and white statements, our world is very, very gray. There's very few things that are black and white in terms of right, wrong, boom, boom, right? And the fact that you would even that you can say it's like it's okay to not smoke cannabis and to smoke cannabis, to smoke it recreationally, to smoke it medicinally, or just consume it, is part of this conversation, because I would lean towards yours to sit there and say, and I think we need to just accept that it's okay. If you just smoke it recreationally, you don't need to have people pounding you going, no, you need a medical reason. It's like, no, maybe I just, just like I like to sit down and watch a baseball game and just chill and relax. And sports for me is a relaxing yet also tension.
It is like cannabis.
I enjoy that
cannabis
competitive.
Is one of the only things that I found that can like amp you up and make you up, but it can also bring you chill and make you relax.
So if I use baseball for that, why can't you use cannabis for that? And people say, oh, well, they're just the church would say, phrases like they're just using it to escape life.
But
and it's like, well, we read fiction novels, we watch movies, we go to sporting events. All of that is to escape life.
Right. And there may be people who are using cannabis to escape. I mean, I can't speak for anybody, which is why I'm always hesitant to be like, you have to smoke weed or do edibles to fully maximize your life or whatever. Like, I can't speak for other people. And cannabis, like for some people, an entry point can just be topicals. I don't know if you use topicals, Timmy, but
he does.
Oh, that's what I've been using on my hand.
Right. Because I told him, I'm like, you're not going to get high from it. I mean, unless he starts licking it, because it is.
I do
that. Is a cannabis oil.
It's a wound, and I literally would lick my wounds.
That's funny.
But yeah, I sliced up my hand pretty good 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago on Tuesday, as of this recording.
You should have got stitches, but they bandaged him up so good where he injured it that they said, "Whoa, they did such a good job."
Right on the fine. It was right on the fine line, and so I had mashed it up pretty good, and it's taken 3 weeks to get to this point. But I have been using for that probably 2 of those 3 weeks after I was able to start kind of removing bandages and they weren't kind of open wounds. I've been using.
I made it here in the magical butter machine with avocado and coconut oil.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but it's a THC.
Yep, it's pink Kush.
Okay, so I've been using pink Kush on my hands, and my hands look good. Now, some people would say, well, there's no proof that that's the cannabis doing that. Fair enough. I don't know either. Maybe it was just my skin healing up nicely. Maybe I've got great skin. Maybe it's other things that I took care of. But the reality is that I did use it, and my hand has healed up very nicely. And so, unless someone can show me the other side to say that it didn't help.
Right.
Okay, I'm not very educated, Marge. I'm curious. I just had a thought. So topicals, when you rub them on, they don't go into your bloodstream, so they don't make you high.
No.
But what if you had a cut and it goes in your bloodstream? I was just looking at Timmy and I was like, oh no.
I don't.
Oh, I'm a drug addict.
Like, did it go into his blood? Did he actually get like some?
Well, I mean, he didn't feel high, so I'm going to say no. And I think the amounts that would have to like enter into your bloodstream in order to reach your brain would have to, like, you'd have to have open.
Well, I would pour it on, like pour it like over a sink, like just like I didn't know how much I needed.
I told him I would never dose him without his agreement, and I feel bad.
I think maybe you have. I don't know, Timmy. You are the drug addict you're always hoping you wouldn't be. So I'm sorry.
I'm not even a newbie anymore now. I literally have been like consuming it for like 2 weeks solid.
It's funny that you guys mentioned this, because I'm just curious if, like, you using a topical, does that make you a cannabis consumer? Even though it's not like a traditional
Well, I think it would have to, because we use the word consumption when we talk about the 5 forms of consumption, and one of those is topicals. So unless we've misused the definition.
Well, no, you're still using it. You're still rubbing it on and consuming the product, whether you're not putting it in you, you're putting it on you.
Consuming and using, by definition, are two different words.
Not the same?
No, because consumption is taking it inward. Would it not be?
I guess
Marge?
so, yeah. Maybe we're getting to some
being the expert.
I've muddled the issue a little bit, but this is all by way of saying that my 92-year-old dad will use cannabis topicals and some CBD edibles. He'll never smoke a joint or eat like a more traditional edible with me, which is fine. I mean, it would be nice maybe, but maybe it would be weird. I don't know. But it's just nice that someone like my dad can decide, oh, it's legal now, because that's literally what he said to me. He's like, oh, it's legal now, it's fine. Like, I don't know what the problem ever was. I'm like, oh my God. But anyway. But I mean, it's such a safe entry point for a lot of people to experiment with cannabis and see how it can help them in their life. And that cannabis use doesn't have to mean, smoking joints and bongs and, eating 500 milligram edibles or whatever. So that's another thing that I love about cannabis, is that it can help a lot of people. It doesn't mean you have to be consuming it in the traditional way.
So maybe consumption is the wrong word. Maybe using is just simply like
you're a user.
But that's right. That comes with this. That's such a loaded word, right? You say you're a user. It's like it's so weird, the language, but technically, I mean, I don't smoke cannabis. I am open, and part of the journey that we're going to document at some point here will be, edibles, those type of things as well. But for the last 2 weeks, daily, I have rubbed cannabis oil on my hands.
And is this the first time you've really used like a topical like that?
On a consistent basis.
I think so, yeah.
I've used, like, when he's like, oh babe, like I kind of like tweak my shoulder or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'll rub your shoulder, and I just grab the cannabis
I do that every
oil,
night.
And I'm like,
babe, I tweaked my shoulder again.
Yeah, I do a really good I have this oil called Blue Heat.
Yeah.
And a couple drops of that essential oil mixed with the cannabis oil just adds a little bit of heat when you're rubbing, and it just we don't know. I don't know if it's the cannabis oil. I don't know if it's the Blue Heat. I don't know if it's the massaging, but I mean, you say it helps. So
I would say, I mean, like from my experience, because I've used a lot of Tiger Balm, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It gives you icy heat, because I have a bad back, and I hate to say that because now I'm like one of the millions of people in Canada that have a bad back. But here I am, and I've used a lot of Tiger Balm on it, and it can distract me from the pain often, but it's the cannabis topical that makes it feel like it's not there for the moment. So for me, the icy heat or the heat can help, but the actual cannabis infused topical is what actually gives me improved relief from that. So anecdotally, it's the weed.
I think what we've been talking about here is a sign anyways of the progression of, like, ultimately the goal is that you come to this place where people use or don't use cannabis, and it's not even a thing. It's like they walk into a store, they get some cannabis oil, or they get Tylenol or whatever. Like, it's just it's like, okay, you pick whatever one. Because when we're talking about me using it, because I never thought about I knew I was using it, but it's like for 2 weeks I've used it consistently. And you talk about your father who is now like using it, and it's like they still wouldn't smoke, but they've crossed the line and have understood that cannabis has the benefits. And I think a generation ago, when I was growing up, that line mostly wasn't crossed. It was like if it has even hemp might even be considered like of the devil, right? You'd have to be in an extreme case, I think, for that, but not those extreme cases exist. But I think that's what's slowly happening, and I think it's worth recognizing that there's a group of people who never would have gone to, say, the Kind summer fair that we were just at,
Yeah.
or to Lyft. They would never dare walk into a cannabis store per se. You know, maybe they still send a friend to, but they have at least now hit a line where they realize that, okay, there are some benefits, and that's a victory.
Well,
absolutely.
I think even just like Marge's dad said, it's legal now. You know, like I remember I was at a truck stop restaurant when I was working for Advanced Nutrients, and it was 2 days after cannabis had became legal, and it was on the news that they had sold out of all of the stores and all of this stuff. And I remember the two old ladies, and one of them said, you know, now that it's legal, I might go down and try it. And the other one said, yeah, now that I don't have to worry about getting arrested,
right,
I might go with you. And I was like,
and that like
smile.
So many people away from trying it out, honestly. Like they're like, I feel like people of my dad's generation in particular, and the boomers and stuff, were just like, it's illegal, so I guess I just don't do it, right? And because there's consequences, and even if the likelihood of you getting arrested for smoking a joint, depending on where you were or what your circumstances were slim, it was enough to keep people from trying it out. And I think what you mentioned a second ago, Timmy, was that it would just be nice. I think what we're all looking for is for us just to have it be normal. Like we have conversations about alcohol, and no one's like questioning that you're not having a fifth drink. No one's saying, why aren't you drinking tonight? No, I mean, sometimes you have friends who might be like, why aren't you drinking tonight? But no one really questions your choices around how you drink or what you drink or when you drink.
Or
where or any of that stuff. But somehow with cannabis, we still have so many of these taboos around it that it's like, yeah. So one day it would be nice if it was just normal. You just walk into a store and smoke it on your front porch, and no one's gonna be bothered by it, or you know.
Right? I want our consumption sites.
Yes.
Where are our clubs and our friggin' like lounges?
Yeah.
I think there will always be. Unfortunately, I think there will always be, though, the group of people, because especially in the smoking realm, there will always be a segment of the people, and I appreciate one of the reasons why our relationship works is because there's things that MJ does that I really respect, and that is things where when we're walking along the street, even though she can smoke cannabis whenever and wherever she wants now, if she sees people coming towards us, especially if there's a kid, she'll walk to the outside of me, and she'll hold the joint down.
Keep it away or
and
whatever.
She doesn't have to, because there's lots of people who, in every, not just in cannabis, but in every form, there's just people out there that are like, I'm gonna do this, and I don't even care if it offends you. And
I won't even exhale. I'll wait until I get past the family.
And some people might think that's extreme. I think it's just respectful from the fact of, you know, there will always be people who are going to be irritated, not even that it's cannabis.
I get irritated over
smoke.
Cigarette smoke.
Yeah,
and I'm a cannabis smoker.
Offensive. I mean, as an ex-smoker now, I just find it so gross. And I would rather smell weed, but of course, you're being very considerate, MJ, and that's probably partly because you said you're a mom, right? So, you know, you have that consideration.
I've hid for so long, and like I'm not trying to be in your face. Although one of my favorite things to do is when we're like standing somewhere, I can't remember where we were last, and at the Waterfront Festival, and I had a joint, and I was watching the band or the guy play his fiddle and or violin, whatever it was, little thing with strings. He's really good.
The fiddle people are not going to like that comment.
Neither are the violinists. So there was a gentleman sitting on the bleachers, and I made sure I like stood away from Timmy because he was on the bleachers, and there was another guy on the bleachers, and then the bottom of the hill there was two people sitting on like a blanket, and one of them had dreads and one of them had tie-dye. And I shit you not, I'm standing in the corner smoking my joint, and because the guy, he does this, he looks over there and then he goes like this, and he looks down the hill and he's just looking at them, staring at them, waiting to see if they're smoking. I'm like, it's me. It's me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
The one in the cute dress that you wouldn't friggin' like, it's me. So as much as I do enjoy that, I'm not in your face and like blowing bong rips in the
But that also just speaks to the stereotypes that still are very much alive and well, because he looks at the tie-dye and the dreads.
Yes.
Those people. And meanwhile, it's MJ smoking.
Right? I'm like, maybe I should be out there more and be like, no, this is what a cannabis consumer looks like.
Right. Yeah, because you can't really
be like,
what
I'm sorry.
Consumer looks like.
If it's bugging you, I can move. I'll move further away.
No, and that's one of the other another reason why we're together. We've talked about this very openly. We probably never would have got into any sort of phase of getting to know each other if I had looked at her and went, she's a cannabis consumer. It was the fact that I didn't know, you wouldn't have known, and was sitting there going, wait, you're fully functional. You don't have, the red weird eyes. You look like,
I thought he was crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? I literally just smoked a joint, or else I wouldn't have been able to do what I did. Like,
right.
And I think, we've talked, and you probably experienced this too, Marge, where, growing up in the church, I would say even just 2 years ago, even going, I didn't know anybody growing up who smoked weed. And now I realize that some of those people that I was sitting in the pew with every Sunday morning might well have consumed cannabis, or maybe used cannabis on their hands for whatever, and simply didn't talk about it. But you never would have known they did.
I would love to know who at my old church is smoking weed when I was there. That would be some real gossip.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so, and I think in this journey that everybody is on is, and it just comes down to human beings trying to get rid of whatever weird, like anger thing everybody's on, where it's like everybody's the enemy if they don't agree exactly with what I say. But it's like, if you're walking around and consuming it through smoking is your method, just because somebody goes, oh, when you walk by, doesn't mean they're anti-cannabis. It could simply mean that they just have an aversion to smoke. Maybe it's not. Maybe they've got lung problems. Maybe they grew up in a home where it was they lived in a smoke-filled home, and they've developed an intolerance. And it's this thing of going, oh, why do I can smoke whatever. It's like, no, let's just have some respect and realize that not everybody is anti cannabis, even just because they went like this.
Right.
It's not a hatred.
I know people that really don't like the smell of weed when it's burning. And I love it. I do enjoy it. I don't smoke a lot of joints, but when I'm out and about and I can smell weed, I'm like, somebody's chilling, and it's great. But I know people who can't stand it. And for whatever reason, I think they're crazy, but that doesn't mean they're into weed, like you said, though.
And it doesn't mean that they're wrong.
Right.
Well, I also feel there's a difference too with what you just said, with the, just the, ooh, somebody's having a good time.
Yeah.
And then the person who's standing right by the exit door at the hospital or wherever, just having, whether it's we'll just say a smoke, having a smoke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's 2023. We don't smoke in airplanes. We don't smoke in hospitals. We don't smoke in offices anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of that thing where it's just be respectful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
So obviously we've talked a lot about smoking here, but we want to, as we kind of finish this off, we need to get into edibles, because that's where you focus.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did you start the podcast strictly on edibles? Like with the Bite Me podcast title.
Right.
Now that I'm thinking about it, did we even talk edibles? We didn't talk edibles.
A little bit at the beginning. I mean, because I talked about how I like them.
Yeah. No, I mean, when we were on your podcast.
Oh,
because here I am, I'm like, oh, she has a podcast on edibles. I'm like, but we didn't talk edibles.
Right.
Did we?
I'm trying to remember. I'd have to go back and listen to it again, which I will be doing, but I probably did touch on it, but
so let's talk edibles now, as we're kind of finishing this conversation off, and why that became your focus, why you even started this podcast, and what you're hoping to do with it.
Basically, I'm a huge. Can I pause for a second?
Sure.
I'm so sorry. There's like a garbage truck going by, and I don't know if you guys can hear it, but like that's all I can hear, and for audio purposes, that's probably not ideal. So I just had to shut the windows real quick. But I started the podcast because I'm a huge podcast consumer. So I've been listening to podcasts for quite a while. It's how I like to listen to things. I'm more audio oriented than visual, probably. And I was really into edibles when I started it 4 years ago. And it just seemed like something I wanted to talk about, which is a good thing, because when you start a podcast, it has to be something that you want to talk about a little bit before, because a lot of people might start something and then realize 10 episodes in, well, there's nothing more to say about this. And then it just ends, right? So I was making a lot and experimenting and learning a lot of things about making edibles. So I started it not really sure what I was doing, I guess. And I came out with my first episode, and I think I released another one a couple weeks later. And I was kind of doing it every couple weeks. And then I got my first email from somebody who was listening to the show. And I was like, oh, maybe people want more of this. And then I started to do it like on a weekly basis instead of the every couple weeks, every month kind of thing. And I really enjoy the process of podcasting and making edibles. So it just kind of kept growing from there.
Cool. Did it take you a long time to come up with the Bite Me podcast? That name? Branding is so important, and I love your name for it.
Well, thank you. Bite Me. I mean, it's Bite Me podcast or Bite Me the show about edibles. Bite Me, I can't remember why I came up with that. I don't think it took me that long, to be honest. And Bite Me the show about edibles, it's like pretty obvious what I'm going to be talking about.
The best things come real quickly like that.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So no, I don't think it did. Yeah.
So what's the purpose? What's the purpose of the podcast? What do you want people to just understand edibles more? Do you just want to just have the discussion? What do you want to do with it?
It's really geared to people who are making edibles. I mean, I guess if you're not making your own edibles, then you can still listen in, because I have a lot of great guests on my show, like the Noobie and The Doobie coming up very soon.
We're going to have them on at some point.
Yeah. So a lot of it's geared to people who are making their own edibles, because I do interviews and I do like solo episodes where I'm going through an infused recipe that I've made in my own kitchen. And I'm not a professional chef. So I think that's sort of my niche in a way, because there's so many amazing chefs, culinary cannabis chefs, that are doing fantastic stuff. And I've had a number of them on my show as well. And I learn a lot from them, but I don't have like any magical knife skills or some fancy culinary background or anything. I just had to cook food for my family and try not to give anybody food poisoning really along the way. So,
have you been successful with that?
I've been successful.
Okay,
yes,
good.
I can say that. I've never given anybody food poisoning. But so from the perspective of I'm just somebody who likes to cook, I tend to work from recipes a lot. And I'm just trying to show people that if I can do it, you can do it kind of thing. Because I think edibles are really intimidating for a lot of people when they're just starting out. And yet it's also the route that a lot of people go to now to get into cannabis, especially people who are, in that demographic, I guess, where they're like, well, it was illegal before, so I didn't do it, but now it's legal, so now I want to try it. But they don't want to stop. And so a lot of people are interested in edibles for that reason, but they find the process intimidating. And, legal dispensary edibles, there's some drawbacks to them. And when you're making your own, you can do whatever you want. You can, what you're putting in them, how much is going into them. You can use the best quality ingredients that you can afford or you want to use. And so you have a lot more ability to sort of control the experience, if you will. And you can infuse almost anything. So it's more interesting as well.
So I'm curious because my neighbor, her husband went to get her some edibles for her birthday and bought her stuff from the non-legal market, from Legacy Market. And obviously it was a high dose edible. And like you say, a lot of people are turning to edibles right now. And if they're not educated and they get a high dose edible as their first experience, that could really turn them off of edibles altogether. So I'm assuming in your podcast, you must have done something on how to measure dosing properly.
Yeah. And I talk about that a lot, actually, because if somebody gives someone a high dose edible for their first experience, that's just being kind of reckless in a lot of ways. And, if you have access to legal market edibles and you want to start out, you can start out with 1 milligram of THC. And that may seem ridiculously low, but I know large men who get pretty high from 5 milligrams. And then I know teeny tiny women who could consume like 500 milligrams. So, like, it's not, you could have a real high tolerance to smoking too, and that doesn't translate to a tolerance to edibles either. Yes.
That's me. That's
right.
My comfortable, don't feel anything is 5 milligrams.
Right.
My, oh, I feel something is 10 milligrams. And I will tell you, because I don't know how to dose my own edibles, I don't eat my own edibles.
Right.
And when I give my edibles away, I tell them half a cookie is probably too much.
Right. Right.
And I've even tried cutting the butter with half can of butter, half regular butter.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if you have something on dosing, I'm like, I definitely need that link, and we'll include it in the description, because that's if you're going to be making edibles and you forget to do the dosing, you forget it.
Especially if you're giving them to people, because you can really turn somebody off weed by giving them an edible and they have a bad time, because I've seen that happen and heard so many stories, because I used to work in a dispensary, and when I did, people always came in with these stories of how they got way too high. And so they were pretty reluctant to try it. But if it's somebody who just wants to experiment, like say you, Timmy, are like, I want to try edibles, go to a legal dispensary and get the lowest dose that you can. And they'll have 1 or 2 milligram edibles. And if you don't feel anything, that's fine. You know, you can sort of take that next little step and then just work.
And I say the next day, wait till the next day, and then try 2
I
milligrams.
think we've talked before about this. The concern with edibles is when somebody, like, you know, infuses a cake, and there's no way to know whether or not the slice you took is more or less than the slice someone else cuts.
See, that's why I like cupcakes, because like personally, if I were to do that, I'm most likely using the oil, and I'm dripping the oil in each cupcake as I made the batter. I'm like, that's 1 milligram in this cupcake, 1 milligram in this cupcake. So that's how you can actually. But that's why I'm like, go to the legal market. If you're gonna experiment in like the brand new, because it's all under 10 milligram packet, or it's 10 milligram packages, so you can dose it. Like some have 10 in a pack, some have 2 in a pack, some have 1 in a pack, and that's too much for me.
Unfortunately, Tupac is dead.
No, he's not. No, he's hanging out with Biggie.
Right. But it is a good idea. And I've bought like edibles from the legacy market as well, because it's more cost effective a lot of the times, because I'm sort of if it's a drink, I can do 10 milligrams. I'll actually feel something a lot of the times from the 10 milligram drinks, but I'm around 20 milligrams kind of thing. So if I'm buying it from a legal market dispensary, I need to buy 2 packages of edibles to feel anything. And then you're looking at $20, and for that $20 I can make myself like a batch of cookies or something like that, right? So
and the options are more limited too at the cannabis stores, because this is what they have. You know, like somebody I think yesterday was asking me, well, have you tried this chocolate? And I was like, well, no, because I'm not really like, I don't really like chocolate. Like if I'm gonna eat cannabis oil, most of the time I'll just drop it right in my mouth, because I don't want to waste it on any of the pan or whatever like that. But a lot of time I'll fry my eggs in it.
Right. Yeah.
I'll just in the morning.
So many options, or people put it in their coffee or their tea, or you don't have to. And that's the great thing about making your own too, is that you're not just limited to gummies and cookies and chocolate, because that seems to be, because of the way our dispensaries are set up, that's what we have available to us. I see what they have in some places in the States, and I'm like, oh, that would be so great. But we're not there yet. So in the meanwhile, just make your own, but don't be
and there's more than just butter too. Like you literally, you can make, my favorite is to infuse the liquid, either liquid grapeseed oil or coconut oil or avocado oil, because I find not only can I ingest it internally, but I can rub it on me and it works just as well.
So olive oil too. I really like infused olive oil, and I like infused honey a lot. I would say coconut oil, olive oil, and honey are my favorite infusions, if you can have favorites. And
have you tried hemp oil yet?
Like infusing it?
Yes.
I haven't. And I think it's mainly because it's got a pretty strong taste. I don't know if I've consumed it before for health reasons. And I don't do that anymore because it's pretty strong to just drink hemp oil off the spoon. So I put hemp seeds in my smoothies or on my salads and stuff like that. But It's also, I don't think it's super, I shouldn't say shelf stable, but it goes rancid fairly quickly compared to some of the other oils. So I just don't really bother.
I always thought it would be great to have like an all cannabis oil, because like hemp and cannabis should,
Yeah. I should try it. I mean, you could there's no reason why you couldn't, but it's got such a strong flavor that I just don't think it lends itself well to a lot of like applications. If you're making like a salad dressing with it, if you wanted to taste hemp oil, then by all means. But
I wonder if there's something that cuts that taste. Because I know like with certain recipes, sometimes with certain strains of making like butter or oils, when you translate that into like the cookies or whatever, and then you eat them and you're like, oh, this is really strong, like cannabis.
Right.
Certain foods like mint, I know covers up the taste of cannabis. Peanut butter is another good one.
Yeah, anything with a strong flavor is going to mask that a little bit. And it's interesting you mentioned certain strains, because I almost never use certain strains for using infusion, because I'm like a hobby grower, so I often end up, I guess that is a strain, but it often gets all mixed in together. But I also use a lot of cannabis from my dry herb vape, because that's already decarbed, so you can just take, and then but the stuff that's in that vape is often, by the time I use it for an infusion, it's mystery weed, because it's so many different cultivars all mixed in together. So
well, as of right now, the day is still young, so you have plenty of time to do some experimenting this afternoon.
Right.
Marge, we want to thank you so much for being on the spot with us. Definitely take one moment here to tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my show is Bite Me, the show about edibles. I have new episodes come out every Thursday. So there's, at the time of this recording, there's one coming out today. They come out 52 weeks out of the year. You can also find me on the socials at Bite Me Podcast. I'm most active on Instagram. And there's also bitemepodcast.com, which is my website. And I have all kinds of things over there. The show notes for all my episodes. I have a calculator you can use to figure out the potency of your edibles, all kinds of stuff. Nice. So, yeah.
Ooh, we're definitely going to have to put a link in for that.
We'll put a link in the description for that. Marge, just to summarize, and correct me if I'm wrong, you basically said that everybody needs to use edibles, and edibles is the only form of consumption that is legitimate. Is that correct?
That is truly what I believe deep down, which is why I started my show.
Yes. I was going to say that, and you need to go listen to the Bite Me podcast, because that's where you get all of that.
I've already created the sound bite that we're going to use.
That's not. Oh no! You're going to see that all over the internet now.
It was well thought out on my part.
Yeah.
Marge, thank you so much again for joining us. I'm sure we'll connect again down the road. And for those that are listening, at some point, whether before or after, we are also a guest on Marge's show. Mm-hmm. So the Bite Me podcast, you want to check that out and hear our side of the story with her asking us.
That's right. I put you on the spot.
That's right. All right. Have a great day today, Marge. Thank you again, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.